Hi, guys. It's Jeremy with the Online Broadcast Blueprint. And I wanted to do a quick update about a few things. Number one, you'll see the name of the Facebook group that I've started, the Community Online Radio Network, or CORN. You could be part of CORN. Just go to Facebook and look that up, Community Online Radio Network. I'll put a link to it in the description. Also, and this is not a shameless plug of my radio stations, but many of the things that I'm about to share with you, you will hear on my radio station, Radio Valley. And I'll also put a link to that in the description. But just a few undeniable principles, I think, that are crucial to success, at least have been for me, with a community-oriented radio station. Just a quick review of this idea of hyperlocalization, right? Hyperlocalization means we double down on localizing our radio station, right? Hyperlocalization, we can even use the word hyperstratification, because maybe you're not focusing on a specific geographic area. Maybe you're focusing on a very specific targeted listenership. And I think a lot of this applies to that as well. So just make that translation in your mind. If you're not dealing with a specific geographic area, you can apply these same principles to a very stratified audience. For instance, maybe you're targeting folks that all speak a certain language, right? An ethnic community, or whatever. I think these same things will apply. But number one, we're going to double down on the hyper-localization. And I say that all the time. What does that mean? That means that we need to divorce ourselves from the idea that our radio station is reaching everyone on the internet. That's our audience, because it won't work, right? There are thousands and maybe millions of online radio stations that you're competing with that are trying to broadcast to the masses. We are narrowcasting to a very specific targeted population. Okay? Keep that in mind. Now, I want to reset some definitions, and I only say this because I've got a number of friends that are kind of starting radio stations, some of them from radio backgrounds, some not. And so some of these are just basic broadcasting principles, right? But they will apply to what we're doing with our internet stations. Number one, let's talk about the differences between our station imaging and our actual station personality, if I can use that word. Imaging are things like our IDs or sweepers. I kind of use those interchangeably. An ID or a sweeper it's just what it sounds like. It's an ID. It identifies what folks are listening to. And generally these are produced, right? Maybe we produce them ourselves, or we buy them produced. We use some app or artificial intelligence to produce our sweepers or IDs. And you know what I'm talking about. These usually have sound effects. You're listening to Radio Valley, whatever it is. Okay, that's a sweeper. Okay, it doesn't sound like a real person. It's imaging. Okay, we cannot confuse that with what gives our radio station its real personality. And guess what that is? That's us. That's me. That's the real person running the station. Okay? You got to have both. You got to have the imaging. You got to have the fun little with audio drops, and that's the part I can waste lots of time because I love making those. Those are great. Those are awesome. And I'm doing some now where I'm using, my target audience, Gen X and boomers, right? So I'm making a lot of sweepers that will basically say your hometown radio station. Then there'll be an audio drop from the Beverly Hillbillies or Sanford and Son or Gunsmoke, shows that I know my audience remembers. And then it ends with, this is radio value. So it's just a connection to my audience, and they're fun to make. That's imaging. Okay. Now the personality part comes in with what I call my liners. I call them liners. Liners are me talking. Okay. And this is a mistake that I hear folks make. Your liners should not just be the same thing as your sweepers. Okay. Your sweepers they're like a billboard. They're static. It's like a billboard on the highway. Okay. If your liners just consist of you saying something that would be in a sweeper, we're missing the point. A liner is where we inject our humanity, our actual personality into the station. Okay. And if we're good at it, we make it sound like we're actually live. We're actually sitting there playing music. We're there live in person. That's the trick, but that's what we're aiming for. So this is where you are talking to your listeners. And let me just say this. Again, we're not broadcasters, we're narrowcasters. So when we talk, I want you to picture one person. You're having a conversation with one person. Don't say things like folks. Hey, folks, don't do that. Okay. You're talking to one person. How would you talk to one person? If there was someone sitting at a table with you across the table, how would you talk to them? You would think of that conversational level. That's what you're looking for. You're talking to one person at a time. Okay. So, just think of that. Don't say folks. Be conversational. Don't say attention listeners. That's stupid. Okay. People don't talk that way. You want to be conversational. Okay. And your break might be something like, hey, thanks for streaming us today. Coming up, we've got whatever it is. Okay. You want it to sound like you're a real living, breathing person talking to this person. Okay. Rattle paper, click your pen, take a sip of your soda, whatever. Make it sound like you're sitting there right there in person. Okay. And get in and get out. Don't waste too much time, but just be conversational. Pretend you're talking to a person. This comes with practice, guys. It comes with practice. And the best way to critique yourself is listen back to these liners and think, if I was having a conversation and this is what it would that sound natural to me? Does this sound like a person having a conversation? Or does it sound like someone reading something to me? Again, it comes with practice. But those liners are super important. That's where your personality comes through. Guys, try this. Go out and listen to 10 internet radio stations. Pick 10. Just go to Live 365 or whatever. Just pick 10 radio stations and listen to them. What you'll hear on probably 75% of them is all they're doing is playing music. I mean, you won't hear IDs. You won't hear a person talking. It's a jukebox. Okay. That's what 80% of online radio is. It's a jukebox. And people are thinking, oh yeah, my great music mix is going to draw people. Well, if that's working for you, great. But the stations that are good have a personality. Okay. Radio DJ dude, his station, Totally Rad 80s, I think is what it's called now. It's great. It's got personality. It's fun. You hear him talking. You hear a lot of produced elements and imaging, which is awesome. It's fun. It sounds like a 1980s radio station. It's fun, right? Listen to what other stations are doing and do the exact opposite of most of them, right? Just some basic concepts to keep in mind. This is the gospel according to Jeremy, right? Agree or disagree, but here's what I think. And as when I worked in radio back in the 80s and 90s, this was the philosophy. You never go more than 2 songs without an ID. Never. Okay. So every 2 songs, your listeners need to either hear an ID or sweeper or jingle, something pre-produced, some pre-produced imaging, or they need to hear you talking. Okay, every 2 songs. I kind of think a mix of the two, depending on how long your songs are, whatever. You might be playing 4 or 5 sweepers an hour, and you might be talking 4 or 5 times an hour. Okay. Now, this is my personal preference. I think you always want to talk going into your commercial sets. Okay. Never go from music into your commercials. Nothing tells your listeners that you're just a jukebox like going straight into commercials from music. Okay. So before your commercials, that's a natural spot for a liner. That's a natural spot for you to talk. Listen to 70s on 7 or 80s on 8 on Sirius, if you ever listen to Sirius. Pretty much what they do. They're never going to go straight into commercials. Okay. And the hosts, if you notice, very conversational. I mean, very conversational. They sound like they're literally sitting across the table from you, talking just to you. Okay. And there's a reason those folks work for Sirius, because they're good at it, right? But that's what you want to aim for. You want it to be very conversational and natural. Make sure going into your commercial breaks, you have a liner. You're talking. Coming out of your commercial breaks, that's where I play a sweeper. And then I'm right back into music. And then I'm back into this routine of every 2 songs, there's either going to be a sweeper or an ID. Those are the same thing. Sweeper, ID, or a liner, me talking. Now, if you're on the hyperlocalization bandwagon like I am, twice an hour. Okay, this is public service announcements are our bread and butter. That's what's going to make us sound local when we're talking about things going on that affect our audience. Okay. Mine is a rural area in western Montana and northern Idaho. Okay. So if you tune in my station, if you listen to Radio Valley, you'll hear exactly what I'm talking about. Everything I talk about twice an hour at least, I call them hometown updates, where I'm talking about what's going on at various high schools, what type of community events or clubs. Your people tune in and they hear you talking about their towns and their high school and their churches and their, that's what you want to double down on. Okay. Even in your liners, you don't have to in every single one, but even in your liners, if you can add some local color. One thing I do a lot of is I'll just say, hey, thanks so much for folks tuning in from Hot Springs today. I mentioned the towns, and that could be a liner. Simple as that. Hey, thanks for listening to Radio Valley. I'm Jeremy. Thanks for tuning in from Hot Springs, whatever it is, right? But if you listen to Radio Valley, you'll see an example of how I've mixed up the liners and the IDs. And I also play a jingle. There's one jingle plays an hour. And I use Suno AI, right? It's no secret. I use Suno for my jingles. I use AI sweepers. And then the rest of the time it's me talking. And you'll even hear some of mine are old that I made at the beginning, and you won't necessarily hear this, but lately I'm going out of my way to make it sound like I'm literally sitting right there live. And like I said, you do that you don't want to be perfect. People don't talk perfect. If I have some ums and uhs in there or make a mistake, I leave them in there because it sounds like I'm live. I'm sitting there. I'm a real person. And that's what you're shooting for. Don't make your liners just a repeat of what you've already said in your IDs. Okay. This is where you share your personality. If you're goofy, be goofy, whatever, be yourself. And the only thing I would add is make sure you're smiling. It sounds dumb. Make sure you smile. Okay. When you smile, people hear a smile. So you kind of have to exaggerate your energy and enthusiasm a little bit. Don't go overboard, But what happens is, even when I think I sound pretty happy and energetic, when I hear back, I sound a little bored. Okay. So just be aware of that. Guys, it's constant critiquing, listening to what you do, and you'll make tweaks. But make sure you're sharing your personality in your liners. Okay. Never go more than 2 songs without some type of ID or liner. Okay. Again, if people tune in and they hear 5 straight songs, that's way too long. Okay. Way too long. You got to make sure that you are engaging with an ID, your liners especially. Again, I've said it before, for this to work, it's what happens between the songs that's most important. It's what happens between the songs. How are you going to engage folks but between the songs? When you're hyper-localizing, that's where you connect with your folks, by talking about things that are important to them, by talking about things that are familiar to them. You're mentioning their town, you're mentioning their neighborhood, you're mentioning their school. All of these things are super important, and that's how the localization happens. And the sponsors themselves, the commercials, what's more local than hearing your local store on the radio, or hearing a mom and pop restaurant that you go to all the time on the radio? So even your sponsorships reinforce that idea of localization. Hey, this is our radio. This is our hometown radio station. Okay. They're not going to get there anywhere else. Is there anything else I wanted to say? That pretty much sums it up. But guys, if you're picking this hyper-localization or hyperstratification strategy, which I think is a money-making strategy, it's making me money, right? You've got to double down. You've got to double down. And it's counterintuitive, because we think, we want the whole world to. No, that's not what you want. That's not what you want. You want a very specific, targeted audience, and you double down on that. I've said this before. In your mind, picture who your typical listener is, right? And craft everything you do towards that person. Talk to them like you would if they were in the room, one person at a time. Okay. Conversational, sound natural, don't sound scripted. In fact, I would say this: don't ever write scripts unless it's like commercial copy. That the script's fine. Use bullet points. If you've got, okay, I want to make these 3 points in this liner, write the points down and then just talk naturally. And another little thing, especially with public service announcements, when you get an email from someone that says, hey, can you talk about our kindergartner roundup that's coming up, where we want to get all the kindergartners enrolled? Okay. Record 2 or 3 of that. So you got 2 or 3 different versions of that, put those into rotation. And what that does, the more liners you have in rotation, the more it sounds like it's a live station. If you only have 8 liners in rotation, then people come back and hear, hey, he said that an hour ago, right? Then they know this is just all pre-recorded, right? So feel free to do multiple reads on everything that you do and put them all into rotation. That just makes it sound that much more live. And like I said, goofy things, rattling paper while you're doing a break, or clicking your pen so they know, or they hear you bump into your desk. That's great, because it sounds like you're sitting there live talking to them. Those things are all money. You want to do all of those things. So anyways, hope that helps. Thanks so much. Again, Community Online Radio Network group on Facebook. Join it, and we'll be sharing more tips. You'll hear from lots of other folks that are in the process of getting their stations online or already have them online. We'd love to have you join us there too. Anyways, thank you so much. Take care. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.